Okay, so as Dick Buchanan said, we kind of have come to a really exciting kind of point in the conference, and I do think that one of the most exciting parts of these conferences is when we begin to launch and envision collectively some very bold initiatives. And we're really fortunate today to have Peter Coughlan from IDEO to help work us with a process where we are going to begin to engage in some designing, not just as an empty exercise, but as the real thing. And I can't wait to see where we end up by the end of tomorrow. Quite honestly, it's one of my favorite parts of this work. You heard from Peter. He's a partner at IDEO. He leads the organizational transformation practice. Peter and I have had a chance, I had a chance to work with Peter with one of our great clients called Roadway Express, and it was so exciting to work with him where, you know, we'd bring 500 people in a room like this, from dock workers to truck drivers to CEO to chief financial officer, and set up and work on real prototypes and real designs for moving that corporation forward. And you'd come out, you know, with prototypes, so not just words and an action plan and so on, but really build initiatives and the first models and the first renditions of those initiatives. And guess what happens when those prototypes are produced? They create a momentum. And Peter will talk about some of their methodologies at IDEO. But he's worked at organizations like Kraft Foods and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Stanford University, Procter & Gamble, and so on. So with that said, I think where we're going to be turning is a question of how might we, in some of these areas that we've been talking about the last day and a half, you know, how do we, you know, let's say a company wants to really launch a journey in becoming a business as an agent of world benefit and discover the power of innovation through sustainable value. Well, how do they launch that journey, you know? Let's say we want to advance a global learning process like Bruce Mao talked about proof and possibility and how many amazing stories are out there. Well, how might we create a learning architecture for that kind of thing? Principles of responsible management education that were born at our last global forum. One of the questions that they're beginning to look at quite deeply is, you know, if our management schools are going to become, you know, seed sources and hotbeds of innovation in this area, maybe we need a new theory of the firm in some ways, and what might that look like? So there's all kinds of questions that have come up, my pleasure to invite and have Peter, and thank you for joining us, Peter, for this next piece of work that we'll actually do together.
Thanks, David. Yeah. Okay. Fasten your seatbelts and loosen your regular belts. We're going to go on a pretty quick journey. One of the challenges here is we're going to go through a design process, but we're going to go through it at a very sort of superficial level. Even so, with this many people in the room, we can probably come up with some pretty big stuff. And what we've found over time in working with large groups is that there's never a shortage of ideas. There's always a shortage of implementation. So today is going to be focused on the ideas. You might feel a little unsatisfied at the end of today. It's like, well, we got all these ideas. What are we going to do with them? Tomorrow we'll work on actually bringing them into action. One of the things I said earlier on stage is about the power of collectively envisioning together, and that is how we're going to get the world to change, I believe. And so let's do that together. Let's envision a future, and better than that, let's envision lots of futures. And then we'll sort of put them out in the world, and we'll see which ones grow and which ones die, and we'll evolve some of them, and we'll ignore others. And let's imagine a future in which business is an agent of positive change. So that's going to be sort of our overarching challenge today. And we're going to use design to help us get there. So I'm just going to very quickly walk you through the process of design. Again, as you heard earlier, there's no ownership of the process. this is a process. I actually have evolved the language that I used to talk about it based on my client feedback, so it doesn't even model what half of IDEO talks about anymore, because people were like, what's iteration? Okay, we'll get rid of that word, even though it's an I word and I need I words because that's part of the process, but we'll get there. Okay, so step one, is it cutting off the last letter on each of these? Oh, well, okay, so step one is inspiration. And I think the two big elements of that, of the inspiration bit, are around empathy and analogy. And what I'm going to do is walk you through just a couple of examples from work we've done just to give you a sense for that. And by the way, we're going to have to draw on inspiration in a very efficient fashion, which is not normally how we would do this in the process. But so the story I'd like to tell you, I'm going to use stories from healthcare. I understand Toby Cosgrove was here yesterday, and we've actually worked with Toby and his group around helping them create a better patient experience. And some of the work we've done involves us going into the field and understanding, along with our clients, what is the experience that's being delivered. And when we first started out this work, I had no idea what the field of healthcare was. I hadn't ever been in a hospital myself personally. And so we went in and with sort of beginner's mind or anthropologist's eyes, started looking at things in the hospital. And how many of you recognize this device? Well, quite a few of you do. So I didn't recognize it when I went into the field, and I had to ask a care provider, what is this thing? It's actually it's a call button, it's a television remote, and it's a bed adjuster. Wow, that's a pretty interesting thing. But when you come into this, you come into a new environment, and you look at something like this, and you say, but there are perfectly good devices that do all those things together. And why would you actually design a new device that then becomes something that the average person doesn't understand? So, but you got to go and look at it with fresh eyes. Or sometimes we'll go into environments and we'll just look at the activity that's happening. And in this case, we were in a hospital for a week. And guess how many times we saw someone sitting at the information booth? None, not a single minute of the day. And so it kind of made us scratch our head and say, well, what's the intent of this? The intent of the hospital, and by the way, everyone who's in healthcare has the same intent. We want to do good to patients. We want to help people through that journey. But all along the way, things like this are happening that are actually sending the opposite message. And sometimes to really understand the experience, we really need to get deep into role-playing, right? And so in this case, my friend Christian actually had to pretend he had broken his leg. They actually wanted me to go in and spend the night and put fake drugs in my arms, and I said, no, I draw the line there. I kind of can figure out what that experience is going to be like. But can we empathize in other ways? And just getting onto a gurney and with a camcorder, all of a sudden you realize what patients are looking at all day long, right? They're looking at the ceiling. Who designs the ceiling? Nobody. Well, now some people are, but yes, yeah, you know that. So going in and then having these experiences as close to what the customers or the users of the system are having will give you some pretty big insights, especially if you're fresh to the system. And if you're not fresh to the system, then bring someone in who is fresh to the system and let them ask those beginner's mind questions, or the questions with the anthropologist's eyes. We talked a bit about empathy and really empathizing with the patient, but another thing we'll do is to go out and seek analogous systems, analogous experiences that will help inform design. And this is often where some of the big breakthroughs come. And in the field of healthcare, one of the most challenging problems, as you know if you've been in, is just trying to get out, right? It's like, and they call it discharge, which is an absolutely horrible word, but conjuring up all sorts of other things you're not supposed to have happen when you leave a hospital. But so how do you get people in a hospital to say, no, really, you can solve this problem? You bring them out and you show them where they have solved the problem really well. And of course, a great example of that for those of you who rent cars a lot is the check-in at the Hertz rental agency. Just wonderful. And the poor hospital people are like, oh, they can do that? Well, yeah, actually, the technology exists, and if you invested in it, it would be a hell of a lot cheaper than what you're doing right now, right? But no matter. Go out and get the inspiration, and that provides the fuel for moving forward. So step 2 in the process is about ideation. And really what that entails, the skill behind that is somehow visualizing, making manifest some ideas. So back to the healthcare story, when we would go into a hospital and we would map the experience. And of course, you could go to the process improvement guys in the hospital and they have a very, specific set of language around that. But we said, well, can we reword that? David was talking about the importance of language and in sort of creating the future. And so we would rename it as a patient might name it. And it's a little hard to read here, so it has things like this first step: I'm sick. I go to the hospital. I wait to be seen. I get seen by someone. I wait some more, right? Now that doesn't seem very technical, but that's actually very accurate from the end user's perspective. And so making that visible was a really powerful thing for this organization. It's like, oh, they're not waiting for lab tests. They don't know what they're waiting for. And what we would do to engage the hospital staff in starting to grapple with these problems is ask them, okay, put yourselves in the shoes of the patient, or in the gown of the patient, or whatever other humiliating thing you do to them, right? And ask the question, what's the question in the patient's mind right now at each step in this journey? And we did a wonderful activity together with a video of the ceiling and a number of other inputs. The hospital staff that we were working with in 10 minutes generated 200 questions that they felt pretty sure their customers didn't have answers for. So using these kinds of tools to help inspire them to think of solutions is quite powerful. And then going in and taking pictures of the is condition and then starting to use your Post-it notes. You see down in the lower right, we took a big photograph and then just put Post-it notes of new ideas, like, oh, here's where you could hang something on the wall, or what if we gave the care provider a big label so everyone knew what the blue uniform meant instead of having to figure out the color code. And then taking those ideas and actually making them tangible. And we talked a little bit earlier about the power of making things tangible. And so taking an idea that might have existed as words, you can see in the upper left corner, there's a bunch of Post-it notes. Those are words or maybe little sketches. And then people are actually sitting down and building costumes and tools and process maps in order to help them start to really experience a new future. And then, of course, this is where, as designers, we can come in and say, we'll take that vision that you created out of craft paper and tongue depressors and pipe cleaners, and we'll make it socially acceptable for other people, maybe in the community, to, not think that you're crazy. You've envisioned something great, but it's in too raw a state. Let's help translate it into something that will make people more open to it, because it looks more real. So then step 3, implementation. And one of the speakers this morning talked about how actually we're in a permanent state of prototyping and experimentation, our government system, right? And that's really true. And I like to think of experimentation is really the best way to implement. It's really the only way to implement. Put something out in the world as an experiment and promise people that you'll watch it and you'll care for it and you'll feed it and you'll change it when it needs to be changed. And that's how you get people to accept change. So here are some experiments that were launched in a hospital where we noticed that care providers were actually quite reluctant to go up and talk to patients because they felt that the patients were going to yell at them because they'd been making them wait so long. So we said, well, let's create something and put it out there as an experiment and see what happens. And so the staff came up with this idea to create cards which had questions on them, much like the cards they had generated in that session. And so that now the nurses or the other providers could take the cards, go up to a patient and say, which question would you like me to answer? It seems really crazy because you don't need cards to do that, right? But this prototype provided an excuse for some new behavior. And it was a crutch for people. They could just go up to someone and say, put up with me, I'm a little bit crazy, I'm just trying an experiment here, try it out. And this experiment is now a full-time thing, and in fact, it doesn't involve just the care providers in the unit where it was experimented, but it's all throughout the hospital. And not only that, administrators come in because they want to have contact with patients as well. So they see this as a tool to get them out of their finance chair or their executive chair and come on down and be with patients. Or some experiments that, again, have turned into long-term implementations. Nurses realizing that they want to spend more time with patients, so could they actually take some of the routines that they do and put them on videotape? So one of the things when you get admitted to a hospital room is the nurse goes through and says, this, you got to do this, got to do this. This is what that strange device is for. It does those 3 things, right? So the nurses went home, got a video camera, and videotaped themselves in multiple languages, by the way, because that was another thing they realized, that not everyone spoke English, and then started playing this videotape. And guess what? Patients didn't want to hear it right when they got into the facility. That they were already at overwhelm level. They would play the tape when they were ready to receive the information. Or something as simple as a list saying, here's what's going to happen to you over the next 3 days, and patients being able to see that and really feel that and experience that. And when staff try to take these things away from patients, the patients say no, which is really great. Don't take that experiment away from me. That makes my life a lot better. It's almost an instant proof of value, and it actually forces the organization to figure out how are we going to make this not a prototype anymore. And some of our solutions, Dick was mentioning that one of the early forms of design being about graphic design, and much of our work is actually about communication and connection with people. And I actually now see this as kind of a form of participatory design where you sit down with your doctor and you fill out the form that's going to say, this is my pre-surgery experience, and this is these are the different activities that are going to happen. This is where I need to go. And this device then helps people move through the system. So, inspiration, ideation, implementation, 3 easy steps, and we're going to get through mostly the first one this morning. So I had a challenge in working with David. David already has some really, I think, some fantastic and world-changing ideas. And we also want to give you the chance to maybe blow those ideas out of the water or build on them, etc. But what we'd like to do then is to present some of these world-changing ideas. In fact, you'll see them on your table. There's a handout. I think there might be just 1 or 2 there. And David, you wanted to speak to some of those?
As we go to the ideation mode, very often the question is, how might we? How might we design, whatever it might be? And I want to start with one idea that came out of the first Global Forum as a seed idea. And the thought is that, as we start hearing these stories all over the world, I shared with you the story of, in Israel and the amazing miracle in Tefin and so on. And what a world-class story that was. Bruce Mao shared tons of stories that just aren't reaching the public attention. So the idea that surfaced is, what would it look like to design something as powerful, if not more powerful, than a Nobel Prize for business as an agent of world benefit? What would the learning architecture look like? Well, how would we circulate and leverage a prize, which is maybe the prize image isn't quite right, but the underneath the prize could be a learning process. And what was exciting when the idea was born a couple years ago was, what it sparked for me was just how important this global and moment of global learning is, and how do we scale up our learning faster and speedier and in a different kind of way. I was inspired by the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome, after all of these books that are very dismal, almost like, how Jeff Sachs was painting the picture of these huge challenges. Most of the Club of Rome books were the same way, but then there was one that was more hopeful. and it was called No Limits to Learning. And it was a very interesting book by Harvard professor Botkin and a few others. But I loved the concept that they presented. He started looking at it. He said there are no limits to human learning. There might be limits to our resources and so on. But he argued that we need to invent a whole new kind of learning today. You know, and he looked at it and he said, throughout the millennium, how have we learned as human beings? We've learned through trial and error, through experiment and school of hard knocks. And he made an interesting point. He said, for so many of the issues today that are quite irreversible in their consequences, like the loss of species, we don't understand, you can't take that in so well, but it means extinction means forever. There's a lot of issues that are starting to develop that are so irreversible in their consequences. One nuclear holocaust is what? It's irreversible in its consequences. So he says what we need to invent is a new kind of global brain, a new kind of global learning that he called anticipatory learning. Learning in the mind, learning in the imagination, way before it happens. And so one of the thoughts with this idea to actually get serious about designing a Nobel-like prize for business is to ignite an experiment in global anticipatory learning. How do we surface these stories? How do we leverage these stories? How do we connect these stories and so on? So anyway, so that's one circle here, and we put these in 3 circles. The other is this idea of accelerating worldwide learning, and that came up yesterday as one person was talking about just all the enabling technologies we have today, you know, and what might that look like? How might that look like to accelerate the worldwide learning and leverage these stories and these strengths and these capacities in our management schools and our leadership programs and so on. Another on the bottom is this idea of a very practical idea that came up. Several CEOs and executives have just said, okay, you know, how do we launch? If we decide we want to engage sustainable value creation, this both-and perspective and so on, you know, can we design a prototype here on how to do that? How could any company begin to launch the journey? You know, Ray Anderson spoke, and he talked about this as mount sustainability, that it is a journey. But, you know, if we put our minds to it, how do we help every organization? And in fact, like another metaphor of another award, like the Baldrige Award, does just that. That's a neat metaphor as well. You know, that's a different kind of prize because it actually helps move companies to these, you know, I remember visiting Boeing, and just incredible organization as it relates to quality, but it was partly because of the tools and methods, because of the Baldrige Award. But how might we do that? You know, if a CEO came up to all of us and said, how do we launch this journey? So how might we do that? Another, I think, with our partnership with the UN Global Compact and PRIME, Principles for Responsible Management Education, another big question is, as 250 to 300 or 500 business schools have signed on to new research in this area, what's emerging is a realization that we need a new theory of the firm, you know, a multi-stakeholder theory of the firm, and so on. Let me just ask Sandra or Manuel to just amplify that, or just add a little bit to that if you could, quickly. Yeah? Yeah. You could do it from there if we have a microphone. Sure. And yeah, and just right over there. Yep. Is the microphone on? It was.
Okay. Sorry. Well, the idea, David, is that, yesterday we were talking for a long time about a paradigm shift. And we heard Jeffrey Sachs talking about sustainable development and the need to change many systems, from the food to the urban system, the energy system. Bill McConnell was talking also about the need to in a way integrate the economic, the social, and the ecological imperative. So we had some ideas yesterday about how this paradigm would look like also in theoretical terms. But we feel that there is something missing, a very important piece, and that piece is what companies should be doing in this part of the equation, in this new paradigm. And but what we think is that companies at this moment, and certainly that's something that we see very clearly in the Global Compact, are already practicing in their practice. They are not looking anymore into the short-term profit maximization, but they are trying to maximize profits and at the same time keep very clearly two constraints. One is the sustainability of the own company, and at the same time the other one is the sustainability of the planet. So the practice is there, but we feel that the theory and a revision of the theory of the firm is not still there. We have a dominant theory, and that dominant theory is based in marginalism, is based in short-term profit maximization, and is based in the stockholders' value theory that has failed already. So we really think that at this moment, if we were able to start revisiting the existing theory of the firm and constructing a new theory of the firm, that would be a great help for the practice of so many companies around the world, and a very important idea. We are, as you know, working to change the curriculum of business schools, putting at the core of the curriculum the concepts and the values of sustainability and corporate citizenship. But let me tell you, educators will not change their education unless they change the theory that is underlying their teaching. So I think that if we were able to envision a process by which we went towards the formulation of a new theory of the firm, the leap would be incredible. Of course, there are some already attempts there, and we want to build on them. And Sarah Waddox, that is one of the closest friends of the Prime Office and the Global Compact Office, along with David and so many others in this room, will talk a little bit about the steps to be taken here.
Well, we don't know what the steps are, but we hope that you can help. We want to invite you to a conversation that asks you to help us begin this process of envisioning a new purpose for the firm that better meets the needs of the 21st century. In doing this, we're building on the work of Corporation 2020, which is having its summit on the future of the corporation next week, and looking in particular at the incentives in the financial system and how they need to change, and also the business as an agent of world benefit, and the conference that was held last week on conscious capitalism. So there's a lot of, and many other initiatives that are underway. But despite all of this, there are many entrenched interests and a dominant economic and finance view that, as Manuel said, holds tightly to the notion of maximization of shareholder wealth for one stakeholder. We want to argue that, in the words of Rabbi Hillel, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? We can't waste a good crisis, as Rahm Emanuel has told us. And so we need to begin this conversation globally now, and that's what we would hope to engender.
So thank you very much. So the idea here, let me just share with a thought, is that each one of these can lend itself to terrific brainstorming and prototyping. All kinds of questions in my mind, for example, about, like when I reread the history of the Nobel Prize, in his last will, he said, I want to lift up the innovations that have had in the previous year the largest benefit to humankind. Wouldn't that be amazing to be able to have a search engine and a way to surface these kinds of things? So just as an example of brainstormer questions there, who might this kind of prize be named after? And what kind of logic? What kind of look would it have? What kind of symbolism? What kind of mechanisms to surface massive conversations and lift up, these images of possibility? Like on the naming side, just all kinds of open, questions like, and it should be, like, how do we symbolize that best? Should it be named after two people? For example, someone in the business domain and someone in society to indicate this business and society intersection. I was brainstorming with my son, and he said, "Yeah, Daddy, I think it should be Gandhi Gates, the Gandhi Gates Prize for business." I think of the impact that Peter Drucker had on me, and I'm thinking, like a Drucker, what? So there's all kinds of brainstorming questions that could begin to get in here. And anyway, so that's a little introduction. Yep.
Okay, thanks, David. So, are we back on this machine now? Yeah. So big idea number one: a Nobel-like prize for business as an agent of world benefit. Idea number two: a process to help firms become a source of sustainable value. A world-learning architecture to advance business and societal innovation. You see, I had limited space due to font size here. And to advance prime through building a new theory of the firm. So those are four things that are already starting to emerge, and as you heard this morning from Jennifer, we should listen to our intuition. If those seem like things that are sticky, we'll focus some attention to them. Now, my job as a designer was to translate these into things that are more brainstormable, because if you start with a solution, you go right into the heart of the solution, and we wanted to step out just a level to open it up a bit to inform the process. So I translated what David has come up with into 4 brainstorm topics to help you generate ideas. And you'll see they're very similar, but it's a subtle difference in wording. And don't worry, you don't need to take these down. We'll have them on the screen as we brainstorm. So topic number 1, how might we recognize and reward organizations that create innovations of significant benefit to humankind in order to encourage other organizations to follow suit? So how do we make this sticky, viral, all those cool things? Topic number 2, how might we proactively help any firm that wants to evolve to become more sustainable through a balance of social, environmental, and financial mission? So there are lots of the organizations I'm working with actually want to do this, but they have no idea how to get started. Can we do this? Topic number 3, how might we enable the world to learn more quickly from and act on positive business and societal innovations that are emerging around the globe? And topic number 4, how might we advance in our management, education, and research a new theory of the firm that blends social, environmental, and financial mission at their very core? So those are the 4 brainstorming topics that we're going to ask you to focus on for a bit of time. And I'll walk you through the process so you feel supported. We have rules around brainstorming. And I was telling someone this morning, actually, I discovered my wife is an elementary school teacher, and she brought me a 1959 educator's manual and said, those rules of brainstorming you talk about, those are actually from 1959. And so that was kind of humbling, and also made me recognize that, yeah, we never invent anything. It's always from somewhere else. So. And we're going to encourage you to steal shamelessly from other aspects of life as you brainstorm. Rule number 1 on brainstorming, defer judgment. At this stage in the process, we are diverging. We want to get as many possible ideas out there. And we actually want some of the ideas to be either irritating or funny or something to get your juice flowing, basically. So defer judgment. You can fix an idea if you don't think it's good later. Related, encourage wild ideas. Many of the breakthrough ideas come from some offhand comment that someone made. Actually, it was their intuition. They were letting their intuition speak, and something came out. So we're going to encourage you to come up with wild ideas as well. And don't throw any away. Don't edit yourself. Build on the ideas of others. Has anyone been in there is a brainstorming technique where you sit down and you write silently, and then you post your notes later, or you present your notes. There's no social benefit in that kind of a brainstorm. What we want to do is have you actually present your ideas one at a time to one another. So when you hear an idea, it will invariably trigger something for you, and then you can build on that. rule number 4, stay focused on the topic. So we're going to give you, we already showed you the 4 topics that you're going to have, so in the back of your mind you'll go like, oh, I have an idea for topic number 3, so I'll just write it down and put it aside. Use the discipline of saying, I'm going to actually focus on this particular topic. This one's going to be a challenge in a room full of, 400 so people, but the idea is you can't really listen if everyone's speaking at the same time. So this rule applies at your tables, not obviously as the larger group, right? So this one wasn't in the 1959 instruction list. Be visual. There are a couple reasons for this. One is the theory that it activates it's the left side of your brain, or right? I always get it mixed up, left side of your brain. And the other, I have a much more pragmatic reason, which is that when it comes to selecting ideas later on, it's the ones that have been drawn that usually get selected. So if you are, if you're interested in promoting your idea, this is the best way to do it, frankly. So, and that's often why designers get their way. And finally, another rule that didn't appear in the 1959 list, go for quantity. There's something about setting a limit. I don't see a reason that this room could not generate 4,000 ideas in 40 minutes. There's no reason that you couldn't. And set the bar really high for yourself so that it actually frees you to throw out whatever ideas you want. Because we're going for quantity, not as one of my clients who stenciled these rules on his wall said, go for quality. Kind of missed the point. Oh well. All right. So I'm going to let you, I'll read through these instructions, but just to give you the lay of the land, for the next 40 minutes we're going to be doing brainstorming. And first you're going to take, so everyone, there should be sufficient, I don't know where mine went. Yeah, here they are. Post-it pads, and if they're not, just split them up, and markers. Fight for the dark markers. There's nothing worse than getting a pink marker and a pink pad. No one can see your ideas, right? So go for cross-compatibility, work that out. Everyone is going to be scribing their own ideas, and this is something that we learned in doing these massive events where we used to have scribes, and try scribing for 100 people. It's impossible. All right? And you're going to take one idea and write it on a Post-it note. You're going to take turns sharing ideas. Don't let someone give 10 ideas in a row. It gets really boring, and then you're not able to build on ideas. So take turns. Now, what I'm going to do, for the only little piece of practical management I'm going to do here, is to elect a table captain. So at each table, I would like the table captain to be the person whose birthday is closest to today. Whose birthday falls closest to today. That person will be the table captain. Okay? Talk amongst yourselves, figure out whose birthday is closest to today. Raise your hand if you need more time. Okay, so we're ready. Everyone has a table? Oh, you need more time, okay. Raise your hand if you're the table captain. Wow, this isn't math, guys. Come on, let's go. 20 seconds. Okay, now everybody, even if you brainstorm every day of the week, every day of the year, everyone trips up from time to time, slows down, breaks the rules. So on your tables, you'll see a sheet that looks like what you see on the screen there, and it has on the left side the rules of brainstorming, those 7 rules. And if someone breaks those rules, one thing I like to do is to just give them the pink card or the yellow card or whatever color Post-it you have, and just warn them, hey, you're deferred judgment here, right? You had a question?
Yeah. Are we supposed to pick one of the 4 as a table first, or everybody has ideas for all 4?
Oh, yeah, we're going to go through each topic one at a time. So the question was, are we going to divide up the table to do the, no, we're going to all do it together. On the right side is is some little stimuli to help you think. So if you're having trouble thinking about for a solution, run down that list and think, oh, what if I thought of a different role that could help this activity? Or what if we could design a space that would further this collaboration? Or what could we measure that would change people's behavior? Or is there some training that people would need to do this differently? So that's what the purpose of that list is for. So I'm going back to the list of activities here. The table captain has this very important role of collecting the ideas and making sure they get put on the big whiteboards here, the big foam core boards. And the foam core boards should hold all your ideas. You're probably going to have to use both sides. So the table captain's basically going to take that thing, take your ideas, post them up there, and keep you going. Be a cheerleader. You're going to brainstorm for 10 minutes on each topic. And then when you finish, we'd like you, each brainstorm, we'd like you to stop and count the number of ideas that you've generated. All right? So some people are already innovating. They're getting chairs to put their boards on. The other thing that the table captain can do is to be the easel for the table. All right? Yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, so sorry, there's still a little confusion. Don't worry, we're taking this really slowly. It's a large group to coordinate, I understand that. So you should by now have either one of the large 4x4 foam core boards that you're going to use to put your Post-it notes on, and you should have a marker in your hand so that you can see your ideas from a distance. Or you might be using, I see a table over there using the flip chart, which is a perfectly good alternative. We also have additional materials over in the corner here if you should be short anything at your table. There's a question in the back, but is that a question? All right. Yes, sir. Okay. Right, so I'm not going to repeat your question because it might actually sound like instructions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, here's how we're going to brainstorm. We're going to brainstorm as a large, all the tables are simultaneously going to be brainstorming the same topic, and you will do this 4 times. And the 4 topics we've already shared with you, but we'll put them up. So for instance, the first topic is going to be, how might we recognize and reward organizations that create innovations of significant benefit to humankind in order to encourage other organizations to follow suit? That's going to be the first brainstorm topic. We'll give you 10 minutes and then we'll stop you. But to get you started, and because we missed the whole inspiration bit of the process, just pulled together a few examples for you to get you thinking. Of course, the first one is you've already heard it. It's the Nobel Prize. Well, that would be interesting. So could we create the equivalent of a Nobel Prize to help organizations, to encourage organizations? But I had another idea here was, another one very similar, the International Business Award. So maybe it's a financial means that will get organizations to pony up. Or, this is the biggest loser, maybe we create a reality TV show and we have businesses come on and show us how they do it, right? So who knows? But putting some different ideas in there might help you to stimulate. Yes? Sorry? Okay, here's the topic. Go.